Everybody, and welcome to the second webinar held together with the Low Carbon Building Technologies Gateway and Kickstart Online. So the second webinar is on integrating energy monitoring systems for smarter homes, and will be presented by myself, Dr. Elena Prokofyeva, John Stinson from Edinburgh Napier University, and Ken McCorkindale from UGCO. Just a few words for those who don't know or know little about Low Carbon Building Technologies Gateway. The project has started on 1st of July 2010, and it will run for 3 years and 4 months. So the project ends somewhere in October this year. So the outputs which are set for this project are quite large. So we're supposed to reach 1,000 organizations and create 20 supply chain partnerships, 40 research projects to be initiated, 300 products tested or reviewed for initial evaluation, and then the products animated and products put in onto the full-scale sites or innovation parks. So we work on expertise for acoustic structure, energy innovation design and sustainability. In total, by the end of 2012, we reached 260 products on assessments and tests, and we also, that's approximately 7% of the project completed. The project is assessing products through two phases. Phase 1 related to the testing of prototypes and assessment, and phase 2 is related to installation of the real houses. So the project we will be talking about today is on energy, and it is actually came through both stages, eventually from phase 1 and phase 2, and has been installed in different locations. So now I am giving the control to Ken McCorkindale of UGCO, and he will talk you about the company and then about the project.
Thanks, Elena. You click, John. So just a brief introduction to our company UGCO and the product, and then John will explain how we work together on the project. And what I want to talk about really is that, the focus of our company is about how we use design and technology to affect behavioural change in energy consumers. And I just thought this image was quite pertinent because when we started the company around 6 years ago, energy waste and the whole question of the environment, etc., was quite prominent in the media, and it kind of disappeared for a few years while we all took cover from the economic crisis. But recently, again, it has been headline news because, of course, we're facing the prospect of running out of power and power stations having to close down faster than we can replace them, etc. So it's a subject which is obviously very dear to our hearts, and I think becoming much more important again to end users. So the product, we started the company about 6 years ago, and we were the first multi-channel real-time display device for electricity, water, gas, and since then we added heat and renewables, and we can connect to a number of different types of data. We connect to legacy type meters via pulses, and we use CTs to connect onto electricity. The whole focus of the product really is to give an intuitive and simple and easy to understand interface, which requires minimal effort to understand. We wanted to present information to consumers in a way that was very easy to access, and so we decided to use colour and a very simple traffic light system because those are things that are universally understood. And at the time when we first developed this product, we didn't have smartphones. The first iPhone was launched in November 2007. And of course, consumer expectations have changed since then, and we're now trying to keep up with those. So most people still don't really understand how their behaviour impacts energy spend. And it's really not so much to do with the information that you give to end users, it's more to do with the way that you actually give them it and how you display information. If you can display it in a way which is engaging and easy to understand, then it's much more likely that people will actually take interest in it and potentially change behaviour. Our product goes into both domestic and non-domestic settings. I suppose, value proposition is similar. It's to do with engaging people with how their behaviour has a direct effect on how much energy they consume, and if people are aware of how their actions affect the use and waste of energy, then they're much more likely to feel that they can take some sort of control of that and effect change to reduce wastage. So we push information to end users, as I've said, they're occupants. And I think that's quite an important distinction between what our product does and what some purely online services do. We think there is always a case, there is always a place for actually pushing that information to people in homes and in buildings, rather than expecting them to go and find it. Regardless of how interactive and engaging a web service might be, somebody still has to make the decision that they want to go and find that information. And what our product does is it sticks on the wall all the time, 24 hours a day, and it pushes that at-a-glance information so people are constantly aware of what's going on. And this is just really to reinforce the fact that although the product is relatively small, even when we have it in very large office environments, staff notice it because they walk by it on a day-to-day basis, exactly the same as what happens in people's homes. And if we can engage with people in their homes and in their office spaces, then they're likely to take the behaviour that they have at work back home and vice versa. So together with our piece of hardware, which is, or pieces of hardware, which are the sensors that collect the data and the displays which push that data locally within environments, we also have a web-based service which collects all that data and provides it back to end users via a very intuitive analytics package, I suppose, that enables people really just to drill down into their usage patterns, set themselves targets, thresholds, etc. And I'll pass over to John.
Thanks, Ken. I'm just going to talk a little bit now about a collaborative project between Edinburgh Napier and UGECO. So this portion of the slides is going to be using the case study of the project that we were engaged with to talk about what we set out to find, what we did find, and how that relates in a wider scope. Okay, so just to frame it slightly, a lot of the work that we do currently at the Scottish Energy Centre within Edinburgh Napier focuses on looking at fabric first and thermal upgrades of properties, doing building performance evaluation, post-occupancy evaluation, etc., assessment of the building envelope and comparison to predicted design of a property, and then how it performs in reality. A second part of the wing at the Scottish Energy Centre looks at the performance of micro-renewables, on-site heat generation and power generation. And for those who are in similar fields as what we do, looking at how buildings are designed to perform and how they actually perform starts to raise this very poignant question as to how the actors inside these homes that we're placing them into, how they're responding to these new, more advanced homes. So this kind of led a research path looking at reducing energy within the home, fabric first approach, looking at renewables, but also the consumer engagement and how the end user thinks, treats, and understands energy, their attitudes, lifestyles, and kind of habits towards that. So this led towards our Smarter Homes investigation. To frame this slightly differently, these are the three pillars really looking towards moving towards a low carbon home. So we have the thermal envelope being improved, and that's being that's being regulated, and through legislation, through building regulations, and through incentives, and also through building performance and building assessment software at the design stage, looking at eco homes or Section 7 to encourage designers to improve building stock and the future of the building stock. The micro-renewables are incentivised through numerous different government incentivisation schemes, the feed-in tariff for power and the renewable heat incentive coming out later on, being regenerated later on this year. And that's the regulated energy, which we all know and works in how the house is designed to be performed, or designed to perform. The other side, the other aspect of this is the unregulated energy use. And through, as I said before, through our work, the building performance evaluation, the fabric tends to stand up pretty close, if not within a certain margin of how we expect it to perform. But when we start looking at the energy consumption of these homes a year or 2 years later, and we start to see how they're drastically different from what we expected, that's where we needed to understand. And there's been a very good webinar recently on Kickstart, the Kickstart series of webinars from Julio Bros Williamson and Dr. Purdy of the Morrison Partnership, which look specifically at the performance gap. We're looking here at the knowledge gap, which is a term coined focusing on how people understand to use their homes and then how they actually use them in reality. So categorising the changing energy use behaviour extends to instigating habitual energy conservation behaviour, and then prioritising these decision-making procedures within the occupants to creating energy efficient behaviour much higher up on their list of priorities, decision-making, and changing how they view the purchasing of energy as well. And this extends into reducing the amount of energy they don't need to have on, so reducing wasted energy, and then creating more of a greater social sphere, having a greater social relevance within smaller communities and local communities, etc. So I was going to talk a little bit now specifically about the project that we were able to be involved in. The Low Carbon Building Technology Gateway funded a large part of the project the first couple of months leading up to the field work, and the Technology Strategy Board released a call, and we were able to successfully secure funding for that and do 8 months of field trials. And we were able to involve 2 housing associations, which allowed us access to their stock. So these were houses and flats that were being built in the summer, and the UGECO Energy Monitor was specifically specified for these homes. So before anyone had moved in, the research team had allocated, with the help of the housing officers, a portion of occupants. All the homes were going to have energy monitors, but a portion of the occupants were going to have the energy monitor concealed somewhere on site. So for all intents and purposes, they didn't have any energy monitor, where a similar sample of people had this energy monitor on display. Side-by-side comparative data analysis, and this also included a qualitative data collection aspect to it. So we had the energy monitor that was going to do the data logging and the monitoring, the tracking, but we also went in at the very beginning of the project with questionnaire structure interviews, spoke with the entire family and the inhabitants of that home, baselined and profiled the occupants, and we asked questions relating to how they use energy, related to how they heat their homes and use hot water, and the amount of appliances they have and their daily routines, etc. So this created a backstop of how, if their behaviour is going to change, by the end of the project, re-ask these questions again so we can start to quantify it that way. I included this slide just recently because I think it kind of contextualised it for those who see projects like this and want to extrapolate it up in a certain degree. As I said, this was social housing properties. There's 52 of them, and just looking at the figures, it's a fairly important part of the housing stock in Scotland. I also just come across this graph fairly recently. It was done by the Scottish House Condition Survey, and it was produced recently, but it was data collected during the year whenever we were doing our field study. And what kind of jumped out at me, and the reason why I included here on this is not our figures. This is the Scottish House Condition Survey figures. But let's see, get a little cursor on here. There we go. That's there we go. So we have, at this end of the scale, we have the income band per week charged against how often people look at these energy monitors. And for those who have ever been involved with a Scottish House Condition Survey or have seen the work or looked at methodology, there's a question now creeping in which is asked how many people have these energy monitors, and that figure is increasing each time this work's being undertaken. But a second part of that question asks about how often people view and engage with these energy monitors on the whole. And what stood out to me here was we start to have a gradient based on the per week income. And what I've noticed, just very, very loosely here, is we tend to have quite a large portion of people who engage with energy monitor more passively in the higher end of the income. And I can almost say categorically that our occupants fell within this band of income here for our particular study, and it's almost fallen into the greater portion of these results. People who engage with these energy monitors it's almost polarised, either very closely or almost not at all. And for me, it's almost like an educational deficit where people who don't see the relevance at one end of the scale, or there's people in the same income group see extreme relevance in this. So I thought that was a quite interesting one. So back to the study. Before we kicked off the project, or after the first questionnaires, after the very initial stage of the project, we were looking to categorise the barriers and challenges that we may foresee in this project, and certainly this is what similar projects had pulled up during their work. I'm not going to go through them all, but a number of them here that I want to kind of point out is the invisible energy. People actually are removed from turning fairly guilty in the way that we use energy as a society, and I think it comes back to how each of these occupants had grown up through their lifestyle and through their family dynamic previously before entering to this home. And certainly a lot of the decisions they make is based on homes they've had before or experiences they've had before and how successful they were on implementing previous energy behaviour changing styles and lifestyles. The other one here is good intentions, and what I would say from the very beginning is that from the outset of all the people involved in the trial, for those who had the energy monitor and those who didn't, it was high up on their priority to want to change. But as for the path of how to change that, and as for the path of how to make the significant changes and make those prolonged changes, it didn't always come through in the discussions on how they could enable that and keep that persistent. So the good intentions were always there. It's just about realising that and making it practical. The family dynamic, I'm going to come on to that a little bit later on, but what I'll say at this point is that a lot of the energy reduction strategies are geared towards the bill payer, and it's not just that person who's operating this environment. This environment, it's fairly dynamic and organic in the way it's being used and how it's been seen by various different members of the family. So we're looking at properties here with 2, 3, 4, and up to even 5 occupants. 3 or 4 of them being students or being children at a certain age, and they're going to be using energy, but not always receiving this level of information on how to change it. I'll come back to that a bit later. But then this last part in this slide here is just removed from the purchasing, and many analogies have been used before in this instance where you wouldn't go around Tesco's or Asda or any sort of shopping centre and start purchasing stuff without seeing the price. It's just not the way we purchase other things. So why should we purchase energy in this way? So very simply, just going to show this diagram, and this was the environment in which that we were going to enter into with occupants who either come from homes similar to this kind of existing mechanism or what they expected to move into. So this is a cycle that people are expected to start to bring on pro-energy efficient behaviour. So you use the energy in the home, the energy is tallied 30 to 90 days later and comes back. And that's when then the occupant gets the first glance of how they performed or how they're using the month before, or 3 months before. So this environment here is not conducive of a very cognitive learning experience. It's very reactive. And certainly in our study, the people who have made comment on getting bills previously and initially have that initial shock factor and go, okay, that was too high that month, need to break it down. But essentially that shock factor kind of wears off after a number of days because routines and priorities and other things become more significant. This is what we proposed and this is what we installed as a model going forward in that project, where we had an instantaneous feedback loop. So we weren't improving on the existing loop. We weren't going to influence their bills or how the bills were described or how they were broken down or how they were graphically formatted. It was this instantaneous feedback internally. So the energy was used. The energy was used inside the home. It was gathered by this energy monitor and was reported back to them in real time. And that was to create this cognitive learning environment and a display format so that everyone in the home could see this and how it was being used. So we chose the UGECO Energy Monitor, Scottish SME, and we were involved with Ken McCorkindale and Tanya Ewing long before this project had surfaced. But this energy monitor provided exactly what we were looking for from a logging perspective, where it was able to both gather, collect, record and show the information relating to electricity and gas. So it was a whole house, whole home energy consumption display unit. It was also self-calibrating, which meant that it was in home for the first week and then it was able to categorize or create limits on the coloured bars like you saw on some of Ken's images previously. And because it was colour, because it was vivid, it was different from other energy monitors that was used in other trials. So it did have a numerical display, but that wasn't the largest part of the display. It was this coloured, traffic coloured portion of the monitor that Ken has spoken about, which is used in other aspects of our day-to-day life, from traffic lights, and just using the very basic colour, the colour recognition of human understanding. Red is bad and green is good, and we've been conditioned to see those colours meaning those things. So this energy monitor really had the unique factor, and it also had the logging capacity. So I'm going to quickly move on to results just now. This is the total consumption results over the 6 month period, and what I would say here is just worth mentioning is it was across one of the coldest winters we had seen for quite some time. And what we have charted here is the properties without the energy monitor, or with them concealed in the red solid line here, and those with the energy monitor on display is the dashed blue line below. So the headline result here is that those with the energy with UGECO used 20% less gas than those without it. And just coming back to the qualitative questionnaires, this result also was statistically significant as behaviour change. And I think it's important to mention that, as I said before, all the occupants were profiled on how they understand and use gas for their heating and water heating. And at the start of the trial, all the occupants in both samples, those with UGECO and those without it, answered the questions very similarly. And it comes down to they used the heating when they wanted it. There was no use of controls. Very few of them understood what a TRV was, and no one engaged with the thermostats at any part of the system. 6 months down the line, we returned same questionnaires, and those with the energy monitor changed how they how they responded to those questions significantly, to the point where they engaged with the thermostats, they engaged with the temperature controls, and they also started to zone different parts of the house, so they were using heating more efficiently, and they were using the timer as well, whereas those without the energy monitor continued to use that gas in exactly the same way. And what I think is significant here, and because other energy monitoring trials in the past, specifically in the UK, never focused on the gas consumption aspect up until this trial. And I found this just recently. It was just published recently from DEC, but it was also done for the period of time whenever our research is being undertaken. And obviously, Scotland is up there as the average domestic gas consumption per consumer, because it's colder than some of these other areas here in the UK. But it does make it significant whenever you start to look at how much was saved in this trial simply through the engagement of the users to this energy monitor. These are the results for the electricity aspect of it. And what I would say, really coming back and just relying back on our qualitative results, were the occupants in both samples were fairly confident in how they seen the use of electricity and their strategies and behaviour towards saving electricity and reducing the amount of electricity needed to use. But what is important here is that the energy monitor, for those who were using it, was seen for its advantages as a budgeting tool. An example I would use here is that the occupants in these homes, some of the occupants in these homes were struggling at a certain point during the trial to keep an eye on how much money they were using, how much money they were spending on electricity. So a lot of them then opted for the utility company to come in and put in this prepaid meter, which they had commented was one of the most significant ways and most beneficial ways on keeping an eye on their outgoings for that particular utility. Whereas those with the energy monitor who said they would have changed actually said that the GECO was being used for its budgeting tool and was able to be more proactive and keep an eye on how much they were using before they got to their limit, and then they would instinctively turn off electricity rather than having it turned off on them. So that was very significant there. And also the aspect of the energy monitor being used as a safety precaution function. Those with specifically electricity were able to say and comment during the interviews that they begin to rely on this device and glancing at it before they left the home or before they went to bed to make sure all the things were turned off. And that you weren't getting that sort of feedback from those without the energy monitor. They seen budgeting and controlling their house slightly differently. So, just moving on quickly to the qualitative feedback, more specifically for this project, 94% said that GECO made them more aware of how much energy they were using. 80% stated that the GECO increased their awareness of how much money they were spending on energy, and 91% of the occupants said that the GECO energy monitor was easy to use. And this is just testament to how it was designed, the intuitive colour display, and the different parts of the monitor, which allows specific use of colour at a glance or number for budgeting. 73% felt that the GECO made them reduce the amount of energy they used. What I would say here is, and I think it's worth mentioning, is that during the interviews and questionnaires, there's a bit of a disconnect between people seeing them using the energy monitor and actually then reporting that they used the energy monitor. And an example I would give here is one of the parts of the questions in the questionnaire was, do you use the energy monitor? And one or two of the occupants would come back and say, no, I don't use it. And then they would continue on by saying, all I do is, when it's in the red, I make sure things are turned off. And when it's in the green, I know I can actually start using things. And that's actually the key part of using the energy monitor. So they didn't actually relate that behaviour to using the energy monitor. So I think that's the reason why that number is there. And I would say after the first three or 4 month period, the GECO energy monitor had taken almost like a different role within the learning environment or within the household energy consumption environment. The first couple of weeks or months in some instances, it was being engaged with quite heavily, and people were using the full array of different GECO functions on there. And that was to try and understand what different parts of the home were using at different times of the day, and also different appliances. So it was giving them the ability to start to understand how then to use these appliances for the future. certainly these homes, and I would say it probably extend to many other homes, our equipment doesn't change very often, and especially those related to how the house is run. So washing machines, tumble dryers, and equipment, fridges and freezers, which can use quite a significant amount of energy, they change very rarely. So whenever they understand how these things operate and how much they use, they can be used more efficiently or used in a time of day that is more relevant to the occupant. 84% said that they minimised the energy they used because it saved money. 53 said because it was good for the environment. I just put that in there because it was just, I thought it was relevant to say that the tariff aspect of the energy monitor was very highly reported as a function which allowed them to understand their bills and how they understood purchasing of energy. Come on to that in a few minutes. Many of the participants with UGECO profess that they become increasingly confident about their utility bills. And I think this is also important because on the lead up to the project and the first set of questionnaires, etc., people were completely demystified with these energy bills, and I was actually being shown by a number of the occupants lumps of unopened utility bills because either they didn't want to know, they didn't know, or they didn't think they could understand. But that was a fairly important way for them to start to understand how much they were using on a monthly or bi-monthly or quarterly basis. And after the use of the energy monitor, which broke it down, the tariff and the kilowatt hour, etc., and that aspect of it, a lot of them then started to open the bills and understand the bills, and a few of them then went one step further and then contacted the utility company to change the tariff. All the occupants wanted the device to remain in the property at the end of the trial, which is good because it was theirs. But what I would say here is people had the energy monitor had become ingrained in their lifestyle. It was now a part of from those people who say, I use this thing religiously, I use all the different functions, to people who say, I just glance at it across the room. All the people right down that spectrum said that it was important for them for this to remain in their home because they wouldn't know how to keep this behaviour ongoing and persist with the new habitual routine if it was to leave the property. Key outcomes, the real-time, some of the things that were specifically and repeatedly commented on by the occupants at the end of the trial, those who had the energy monitor, was it closed the link between action and consequence. So whenever something was being turned on or left on or being on for too long, then they're able to initially address that, and that closed that loop of action and consequence, or made that loop tighter, sorry. Because it was a whole house energy monitor, they were able to see both electricity and gas, and that was very important because coming back to the results, people in this particular trial had specifically said that, and some of the anecdotal evidence coming out said that because they were quite confident in understanding how to reduce the amount of electricity because it was ingrained with them in their previous and whenever they were children in their family growing up, and more than enough of the comments that come back at their parents or the grandparents were screaming and shouting at them because they were leaving the lights on for too long. But it was never those stories never related to heating. It was always just electricity. I think that's the reason why we saw such a significant result for the gas consumption change, was for a large portion, for the first time, people were able to see in real time the energy consumption of their gas behaviour and able to create new behaviours and new habits and different lifestyles. Simplified colour display, that was mentioned repeatedly, and the knowledge transfer, and that relates more to how the information trickled between each member of the family. Observations on the user interaction. The energy monitor had brought forward change that participants had planned to make, so that comes back to my earlier comment on good intentions. Initiated change where the possibility had not occurred. I think this comes back again to the gas usage. So as I said before, at the initial stages of the work, a lot of people had said that we just use gas the way we want to use it, we just turn the heating on and turn it off. There's no way I can improve my gas consumption. What it is what it is. And then going down the line, 6 months later, they were impressed about just how much simple changes in attitude, and having that feedback loop where you have the thermostat at 25 degrees, you turn that down to 18 degrees, you can see the coloured bars moving, responsive to that, and it creates that self-efficacy, it creates that feel-good factor, and that's what keeps intentions ingrained. I'm going to come on to that in a moment. Whole house learning, cognitive learning experience. What we benefited from here, and because we conducted interviews not just with the bill payer, but we conducted interviews with the whole family. So we were sitting down with parents and children different age, and those who could participate in the questionnaires and the interviews did, and it was extremely interesting and quite reassuring to see that children at 6, 7, 8, 9 years old were able to describe to me how this energy monitor works. We're able to then use the information they get and explain that to, a lot of them are using this for projects in school, and then for the work that UGECA were doing with the schools in Perth, many of these schools, primary schools, had these UGECOs installed, and that, as Ken had spoken about, how the different actors in the domestic move into non-domestic, the environment change if the person doesn't. Same with the children growing up, they're in the home, they're learning about using energy, they're not connected to how it's been paid, but indirectly they're influenced by how much money then the bill payer or the parent has to spend on other things, so it indirectly impacts on them. And then having that systematic, having that parallel learning experience in the school kind of brought this closer to home and made this learning environment much more richer. Moving on, increased learning of operating the home, appliances left on too long, I mentioned that earlier, and confidence with utility bills and jargon, coming back to kilowatt hour and the CO2 function as well. So this is what we know. The intention to reduce energy is reduce the consumptions there, because the occupants want to spend money on things that they find relevant for their quality of life, and they find relevant that they want to spend things on that they can say, well, okay, I'm going to buy something which means something to them, and not just going out to the utilities. The intention is there not to be in this fuel poor bracket, and for many it's a sense of pride not being fuel poor, and don't want to have to be just another figure in a statistic, etc., and all those sort of things relate to that. So intentions are there, and the route to behaviour change is creating habit, and to repeat habit. So we know